In this video, you are going to learn how to build a worship keyboard rig. This setup is going to feature the Sunday Keys iPad app, as well as a simple, budget-friendly hardware setup when it comes to your Midi controller, as well as an audio interface, the USB hub. We are going to cover it all. So if you are a worship leader, a tech director, or the keyboardist at a church, this video is specifically for you to learn how to build an amazing, simple keyboard rig that produces all of the best and latest sounds for modern worship. My name is Jake Goslin from Churchfront, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. Today, we have David Pfaltzgraff from Sunday Sounds in the studio, and this isn't the first time we've made this type of video. Right. Every few years, at this point, almost every year, we like to update you with the latest and best setup for your worship keyboardist in your worship band. And I'm really excited about this video because we're gonna be unpacking the Sunday Keys iPad app, which is gonna be producing all of the amazing sounds that you're gonna hear for worship piano, pads, synthesizers, electric piano, bass, all the fancy things, right? It can be as simple as you want it. It can be as complex as you need it for those power keyboard users as well. So we're talking about the software, the hardware setup as well, how to have a budget-friendly MIDI keyboard to control the software, and then we'll talk about some of the peripherals like the USB hub and the audio interface too. So let's first answer the question a lot of people are coming to this video for. What is all needed when it comes to building a worship keyboard rig? Maybe first let's talk about what are the sounds we're trying to produce, sure. And then we can talk about like all the hardware and everything that they see here in this setup.
Yeah, so you mentioned that we've shot a video like this before, and the reason that we keep coming back to this topic, I think, is because modern worship music changes so fast. One band will drop an album, and the whole genre gets turned on its head because there's all of these new keys textures that people are all of a sudden, oh, I've got to have that sound. So the keyboardists at churches oftentimes really struggle feeling like, I've got to keep up with these trends that are constantly changing. And historically, that was really hard if you had a hardware keyboard, because you were sort of locked into what was inside of that keyboard, the sounds that came with it from the factory. That's why we saw folks adopting software like Mainstage, Ableton Live running their computers, because it gives you a lot more flexibility. But one of the problems with that flexibility is that there's also a lot more potential to get lost in the weeds. Software can be more complex and intimidating for volunteers, but it's really powerful when you tap into it. So that's what we've talked about before, is how can you harness the power of software without making it inaccessible or scary for people on your worship team. Yep. And that's why we developed the Sunday Keys iPad app. We want to offer all the flexibility and power of software, but make it specifically catered towards worship musicians, worship leaders, and keyboard volunteers, and the specific needs that church musicians have. So I think it ends up being a pretty simple setup at the end of the day. If you've got an iPad, you've got a MIDI controller, and a way to get the audio from the iPad to your sound system, then you're going to be good to go.
And I just want to make sure it's clear to you, when you look at this setup, this physical keyboard right here is just a MIDI controller. It's not sending actual audio to the sound console. The iPad running the software, the Sunday Keys app, that's producing the audio that you hear. Right. So the alternatives, like you mentioned, sometimes people will want to get a Nord or a really powerful keyboard workstation. The downside of that is you're going to pay anywhere from $3,000 and up for a really robust keyboard. Yeah. That may work for some people, especially some of the power users out there who like to learn those types of systems. But man, I've been a worship leader, tech director, been in the church for over 10 years now, probably actually like 15 years. I'm aging myself here, but it's been a long time. And I've played and I've led bands with dozens of different keyboardists, and they want a simple system.
Right.
That's gonna also like have the power and sound amazing. So just want folks to understand, like, there are those different components. Really, in this case, there's two major hardware components. You have the MIDI controller and the iPad. So let's just kind of break it down.
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. Yeah. So we've got the keyboard, and this is what's called a MIDI controller. So it literally just sends numbers out of the controller to the software, to the iPad. It's really basic, and there's all sorts of different price ranges for MIDI controllers. You can go really affordable and inexpensive and make some concessions on how many keys or how good the keyboard feels to play, or you can go higher end, and there's a big price range in between. This is probably my favorite hardware MIDI controller on the market. It doesn't have any built-in sounds, but the keyboard itself feels really good. It's a fully weighted keyboard, and that means it feels very similar to playing an actual piano. So when you press notes down, there's a little bit of heaviness, resistance, and it feels like you're actually in control of the instrument. If you spend a little bit less money, sometimes those keys can feel a little bit plasticky or a little bit lightweight. So if you're going to be playing a lot of piano stuff, which most churches are probably using piano sounds every song, at least every service, it's worth considering spending a little bit of money to get a weighted MIDI controller. But the other thing I'll say, Jake, and we said this in every video we've done so far, you probably don't even need to buy a new controller to be able to use software for your keyboard sounds. Because if you've got any keyboard on stage that was built after maybe like 1985, 1990, it's capable of sending MIDI data out. There's going to be a port on the back that says MIDI. All you need is a cable plugged into your iPad, and it's going to receive data from that keyboard. So instead of the keyboard generating sound, it's just sending data telling the app, hey, make this sound. So if you've got a keyboard that feels good to play, but you want to update the sounds, don't buy a new keyboard right away. Just change out what's generating your sounds. And that's what the Sunday Keys app can do.
So this is the Studio Logic keyboard and the model there. We're going to link it all below this video. We're going to update our Worship Ministry Toolkit, which you can download. Link to that in the description, has the full rig set up within that sheet there. So this is a great keyboard selection. Also, M Audio, the Hammer 88.
Yeah, the Hammer 88
like
is,
that one.
they're both about $500, just to give you an idea of the price range here. And you get full-sized 88 keys, fully weighted. They're very similar. So it just comes down to your preference.
Yeah, and the reality is there's different piano players in your church, probably some who really prefer that traditional piano feel. Maybe others don't mind some of the semi-weighted keys and maybe synthesizers, but this is kind of, everybody can generally make this work. And usually the people maybe who care enough about how their keys are weighted will have their own keyboard anyway, that they can just simply plug and play into the system.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So the MIDI controller, then we just have to get it connected to the iPad. So let's talk about I/O into the app a little bit, because iPads just have one port. If you're used to using a computer-based rig, it probably has multiple USB ports, that sort of thing. So here the solution is really simple. You just need a USB hub that can plug into the single USB-C port, and then underneath it just gives us multiple USB-A ports. So again, I think we're going to link in the description to a couple different options, but it doesn't really need to be that fancy. The one I'm using is $30. And it gives me 4 ports, so I've got the keyboard connected directly, and then that brings us to the last ingredient, which is the audio interface. And you've got a particular one that you like and that we're using, so when you talk about it.
My favorite audio interface for this type of setup, it's really simple, is the Radial USB Pro, because on one end of it is your USB cable input that goes to your hub, which connects to your device, and then the other side of it are your XLR balanced outputs. You know, a lot of other audio interfaces out there have inputs and outputs for like a recording studio environment, but you're not in that environment. You just need a simple way to convert digital audio to analog to send to your stage box or your mixing console. So we've been using that for over a year now. I love it.
It's nice and simple, and it has a level knob, so you can adjust how strong the signal that sends out is. And the other thing about it is you might look at the price tag and think, well, I could get an audio interface for less money from Behringer or whatever. But the thing about that is then you have to convert that line output signal to XLR in some way. Folks buy an extra direct boxes or extension cables to convert it.
And you're going to be at the same price anyway.
Yeah, by the time you put all those ingredients together, this kind of fits the bill, and it's one point of failure instead of 2 or 3.
It's also important to mention it's a stereo audio interface in terms of the outputs, and with a keyboard rig, I highly recommend having the left and right stereo output, because that's going to make a big difference for your live in the room mix. So if you especially have a stereo PA, it's going to give the keyboard a nice big sound instead of being mono. And then also for your broadcast mix online, that's going to make a huge difference. Just how nice and full your keys will sound, especially because a lot of your patches have stereo effects built into them too.
Yeah, that's right. If your sound system's stereo, it's really a great idea to run your keys rig out in stereo as well.
So those are all the essential elements. You got your MIDI keyboard, you've got your audio interface, you got the USB hub connecting everything together, and then we have the iPad running the Sunday Keys app. So David, walk us through, like, when I download the Sunday Keys app, get it installed, what's that process of getting it to talk to my keyboard and the audio interface?
Yeah, we try to keep it really simple because this is something that folks tell us is often where they lose momentum if they're new to software. It's trying to get everything to play nice with each other. So in the app, you just tap the hamburger menu here, go to settings, and then if your audio interface is connected, the iPad's automatically going to pick it up, and you'll just see the name displayed right there, so we know that's already connected. We've got some adjustments here we can make. If your iPad is more or less powerful, you can give it more or less buffer, which just gives it a little bit more time to process. So if you're running an older iPad or a newer one, you can adjust that as you need to.
That'll just add latency, right?
Yeah, so higher buffers decrease the strain on your device, but they add a little bit of latency between playing something and hearing it. So, and then this is also where you can pan your audio around. So if you want to run your keys out the left side and run your ambient pad out the right side, you can do that here if you want to split that out. And then here in the second tab, this is where you designate your MIDI controller. So you can connect two different controllers. One is your primary MIDI controller that goes to the keyboard here. So all I do is go to this drop-down. I can see all of the connected devices that I have. And so we're running the SL Studio, so I just select that, and then I choose which MIDI channel it's sending on. And then if I have a second controller connected, like we've got the Nano Control 2 here, maybe I want to control a fader, and I really want that tactile feel, or I want to control tap tempo, maybe with a hardware button. So I can just go here to the secondary controller and choose the Nano Control 2. And now both of those devices are good to go. And the cool thing is, you could swap out your primary controller for some other controller. So maybe you have a rig at home, and you like to prepare there, you're putting your patches together, then you go plug into the church's keyboard on Sunday. It's just going to be as simple as choosing a different primary controller, and all the work you've done is going to be maintained. You're not going to have to reassign everything manually. Whatever's in that primary slot is always going to function in the way that you would expect. So if you've got volunteers and you want to send them, hey, take this iPad home, go practice the songs, you've got a little keyboard that you have at your house, then come to church, plug in. You don't have to do a bunch of work, just choose the controller that's connected, and it's going to be ready to go.
So if I'm practicing at home with the iPad, how do I hear myself? I know it'll come out of the speakers on the iPad.
Yeah.
Can you use headphones or other devices?
Yeah, you could. Connecting over Bluetooth's probably not a good idea because Bluetooth has a good bit of latency, so you're going to hear that delay. It's not going to feel connected. But there's a whole bunch of hubs and docks that feature just a basic 1/4-inch headphone jack. So if you want to send it home with your volunteers, just give them one of those little docks. They're going to need it to connect their keyboard anyway. Plug your headphones in, and you can practice, prepare wherever you are.
Speak to the different types of iPad options out there, and which ones do you recommend? What's the minimum iPad that they need to get in order for this app to be stable?
Yeah, so we've done a good bit of testing, and we're able to support any iPad that can run iOS 14 or newer. So that includes the base iPad, which is only $300, iPad mini, iPad Air, and iPad Pro. Now, we're using an iPad Pro for this video, and I love the iPad Pro, not just because it's powerful and fast, but because if I'm going to use this as my controller, right? If I want to be able to grab sliders, touch buttons, choose patches, the larger targets that the iPad Pro screen size gives me really makes a lot of sense. And if you really want to invest in a keys rig, I think the iPad Pro is a good option. But in terms of being powerful enough to run the Sunday Keys app live, you can run the base iPad. If you buy it used on eBay, it's probably only a couple $100. And if maybe you're setting up the youth band or you're just kind of testing the waters, it's a great option to start. And in our testing, you're able to run multiple patches in a set list and have no problems on even those older, simpler iPads.
I think that the touch interface on pretty much all Apple products, but especially iPad, iPhones, it is so good. I know personally I would just lean towards using the actual software control there. I know we'll talk about this Nano Control a little bit later here, but I mean that's one of the awesome things about this app and you guys developing for iPad is you're basically unlocking the convenience and the power of the best touchscreen ever made.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of responsiveness, it's really accurate in terms of tracking, it's really fast, and we put a lot of effort into figuring out the most intuitive ways for people to interact with the touch environment on stage when it really counts. We didn't want people to be frantically concerned about touching the wrong thing by accident. So stuff like the mod wheel here, if you're moving it up and down, it just starts tracking your finger position. So as long as you are starting in the right place, you can go anywhere else on the screen. So once you know you're in contact, you can focus back in on your keyboard, you can go look at cues from your music director or whatever else. But because we know it's really important for people to be able to make these transitions really smooth, to not freak out their volunteers in a high-stakes sort of environment, we focused a lot on the touch interactions being as safe and as simple for people to understand as possible. The only thing to know about the base iPad, if you want to consider that option, at least at the time of this video, it's the only iPad that still has a Lightning port instead of USB-C. That's not a big deal. You just need to buy a Lightning USB hub instead of a USB-C hub. And there are options out there. It's just one little difference technically. By the time this video comes out, Apple might have already updated it. But there's just some little I/O differences between the base model and all of the other iPad options that are out there now.
And it sounds like it's important to make sure whatever hub you get, it also has a power supply to it.
Yeah, so it is important that whatever USB hub you use is able to supply power to all of your devices. Stock iPad chargers are really only meant to charge iPads. So once you start connecting peripherals like an audio interface or Midi controllers, you need something a little bit more powerful. But there's a ton of options out there that are able to give you the I/O that you need and supply enough power to charge not just the iPad, but all of your connected stuff too.
So those are all of the different pieces of the system and the factors you need to consider as you're assembling your worship keyboard rig. Like I said, I would just pretty much duplicate or replicate what you see here with this setup. Now let's talk about the most important part, the actual sounds that it can produce, that this software is creating for us. So David, just go unpack for us like how easy it is to produce those piano, pad, and synth sounds with this app.
Okay, well let me just show you kind of what the outcome is. Let me show you a couple of these patches. So Sunday Keys comes with a bunch of ready-to-play patches. You could just give a volunteer, say, here's your piano and pads, you're good to go. And you can build the exact patches you need by layering sounds together. Let me start off by just showing you some of the results you can get from these ready-to-play patches. So this patch is simple, right? It's designed to be able to cover any worship song, any context. You've got grand piano, a couple different flavors of pads. You've got like a trance lead sort of in the right hand for this brighter stuff, and then synth bass in the left hand if you want it. So really you could cover any worship song if you had to in a pinch with just this one patch. You can make adjustments to the layers.
Show them the simplicity of how the layered sounds. Like, I just want piano. Just give me a piano.
Okay, so worship leader says to volunteer, please take everything out, just the piano. There's your piano.
I just want a pad.
Okay.
I know that's gonna sound elementary to a lot of people, like just that concept, but it is so simple and it's not intimidating for your volunteers to be able to do that.
Yeah, or even just to say, hey, volunteer who doesn't really know much, could you give me a delay?
Yep.
If you can read the word delay there, then you can say yes to that ask.
Yep.
So you can just turn it on. And then you can say, hey, keys player, could you just change the subdivision? You can just tap the effect and just dial it in. And the great thing is, because of the way the app is designed, you can ask even a novice volunteer to try those kinds of things, and they're not going to be able to fundamentally break something in a way that can't be undone. That's the thing with a lot of software solutions is you give people this giant open sandbox with tons of creative potential, but there's a huge weight of responsibility that comes with that too. It's really easy to accidentally delete an entire sound or an entire part of your set list and not be able to get it back. In the app, we've made it really, really difficult to take destructive action without being warned. Hey, are you sure you want to do this? Right? So you can open up the effect, you can make changes, and then at the end, you're asked, do you like these changes? You can confirm. Do you not like these changes? You can discard.
Nice.
So you can say, volunteer, just try it. If you don't like it, you can go back.
So you've seen how easy it is just to open the app and start producing some simple piano in pad sounds. So now let's just talk about like how you'd actually use these patches practically for a Sunday morning worship set.
Sure. Whether you're a worship leader or a keys player, we've designed the app to streamline the workflows that we know you're doing week in and week out. You're checking the set list on Planning Center, you've got 5 songs, you know you have some specific sounds that you need, you have specific tempos. Everybody's doing the same thing. What we wanted to focus on is how can we make those processes simpler, faster, and more likely to sound great at the end of the day. So let's just make a new set list. I'm gonna name it Jake set list and create. So now we've got sort of a blank palette here where we can do whatever we need to do. So if we wanted to, we could create a patch from scratch. So let's say that the worship leader leaves a note that like, hey, I'm going to need you to play underneath communion, right? So we're just going to make a patch named communion. And maybe at the particular church, you know that that's kind of a piano and pad sort of vibe. So we could just grab the instruments that we know are most common for that environment. We could grab a piano, and then we could grab a pad.
And these are all pre-configured sounds in the library.
That's right. These are all dialed in and ready to go, but you also have the flexibility to dial them in even further if you have something more specific you need them to do. So I've grabbed a piano, I've grabbed a pad, and that's the instruction the worship leader could give the keys player. Hey, please give me a piano and a pad for communion. And you're able to build that this fast. And then it's just ready to go.
As a worship leader, like, hey, can you dial back the tone of that piano to be a little bit softer?
Yeah. So we could just tap in here into the instrument settings, and then we've got a full EQ section. So we could bring down this low-pass filter and kind of mute that a little bit. Or we could change the size of the reverb and make it really big and dark. Go kind of cloudy. Right?
Wow.
So all the sound design stuff you would expect if you are playing modern worship keys is possible here in the app. It's easy to get to, and it's non-destructive. So you can experiment and you can try things, but you can also just ignore all of that. If you are a volunteer, if you need to keep things simple, you can just pick ready-to-play sounds or even entirely ready-to-play patches. So we built a patch from scratch for communion, but let's say we also have just maybe a generic sort of slow song. Maybe we're doing like a Waymaker, right? Very simple piano pads. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. So in the set list, we just hit the plus icon again. Instead of choosing create a new patch, we just choose add a patch from the library. Now we have a user library here. So if you make patches that you like and you want to use them ongoing, you could save as many of those patches as you like for yourself. But Sunday Keys also comes with some ready to play patches that you can navigate to. And those are going to be organized by types of songs, how much space they fill, what the lead instrument is. So if you know you need piano and pads, you can view a whole category of patches that feature those instruments. So you can quickly sort of identify all the options. So I'm just going to grab grand and pads, because this is that sounds like what we need for Waymaker. Yep. So we'll just play it in B flat. I mean, that's a great starting point for this song. If we wanted to get more specific about the details, we could go in and add some programming to the effects. The mod wheel is always going to control the brightness of those pads, which is really cool, and that's also automatically going to pick up on this mod wheel here. So those pads are going to get brighter if we want to build some dynamically. So then if we know we're going to use this specific patch for Waymaker, we might just want to go in and rename this patch, so that if we give it to a volunteer, they don't have to know grand and pads is for Waymaker. We can just name the patch Waymaker. And then they're ready to go. And let's say, you know what, this patch turned out great. We're going to want to use it again later. So we can just hit export patch, and we can save it to our user library. And we can even add subfolders. So we could say patches for specific songs, patches for communion, patches for youth group rave nights, and do all that crazy stuff. And we export it. So then the next time we need to go play Waymaker, volunteer just goes and grabs Waymaker and loads it into their set list, and it's going to be exactly recalled as it was before.
Another common sound that we want to use in our worship services is just a droning ambient pad. That's a really important tool to have.
Yep.
So I can see it there. Show us how it works.
So we have an ambient pad inside of the Sunday Keys app that we call the Tonic Pad Player. And it's really simple. So it's always available no matter where you're at in your set list. So if you need to fill space and you're in the key of D, you just choose D and you turn it on. And it's just going to start playing this nice pad that's going to work under any chord in the key of D. You can adjust the volume so you could play your keys patches on top. Let's say we're going to go to the key of G. And if you want to, you can fill some different space. Let's say we want to bring a different vibe. Let's just choose the organ preset instead. So maybe one song you want this sort of warm pad in the background, then you go to this organ. We've got all sorts of options here. This is a really cool one called strings. And you can also control how abrupt the fades between those presets are. So if you're going from keys that don't necessarily complement each other, like from C to D flat, and you know you want an ambient pad in both, but they're going to clash during that transition, you can just fade it out and then quickly bring that next one in. So tonic's always available no matter where you're at in your patch list. So you could be here in the key of G, playing Communion. Communion wraps up, band's going to go into Waymaker. Tonic just keeps filling that space, and then we're into Waymaker. But the other cool thing that you can do is have Tonic jump to specific settings when you choose a patch in your patch list. Maybe you've got 4 songs and each one you'd like a drone pad, but they're in different keys. So we've got Communion. Let's say we're going to hang out in the key of C, and we want Tonic to be on to fill space. Maybe we're going to bring this in as Communion starts. So once our settings are dialed in how we'd like, we just hit patch lock. You see that little lock icon. Now whenever we select Communion in the patch list, Tonic's automatically going to jump to these settings. Well, it's not going to jump. It's going to smoothly fade to these settings. So then we could go to Waymaker. Let's say that we're going to play Waymaker in G, and we're going to bring in this guitar drone pad sound instead. So once that's dialed in, we hit patch lock again. Now we can go from Waymaker in G. Then we tap into our Communion. So Tonic automatically glues not just the first song, but that transition, and then you're ready to go for the next song as well. So if you're leading from keys, or if you've got brand new volunteers who really just want to focus on playing their instrument, being able to have this ambient pad automatically fill just the right amount of space with different presets, different keys, and have all of those transitions mapped out ahead of time can really glue together the band in a way that feels great, and you don't even notice it when it's happening, but you kind of notice when it's not there.
So let's say I have a patch for a song, let's like that Waymaker patch you made or something like that. And you know, throughout different song sections, you want to tweak the sound of your keyboard without having to actually like move faders and make it complex.
Sure.
So I see this, is that what the snapshot feature is there for? Or
yeah, that's right. So you've got your patch list, which sort of lets you move vertically from one patch into the next. Kind of think of that from one song into the next. But within each song, you're also moving from verse to chorus to bridge. You may be building or going down dynamically. So this layer here, the snapshots area, you got 5 different snapshots here that will go to specific settings for the same patch. So let's say for Waymaker, we want to start with just this pad. Maybe we're just going to hang out for a little while. So just right here, and we're going to save that snapshot. Okay. So then next time we go to this patch for Waymaker, we're going to start out with just this pad, which is great. And to make this even simpler for a volunteer to use, we can long press on it and we can rename it. So we could just name this like something easy for them. Yeah, so let's just name this intro right there. And then maybe we want to bring the piano in. Right there. So we're going to select our second snapshot, and we're going to tap save. And then we could name this verse and chorus.
I just love that, man. It's so simple, especially because in a lot of cases, I do think a worship leader will have more time maybe to prep these things.
Yeah.
And then your volunteer shows up, they hit song name, and then they just see straight up like, you know, verse, chorus, big bridge, down bridge, or whatever. Like you can make it as complex as you want.
Right.
That is so simple to set up.
Yeah, so all of the sound settings here are saved into these snapshots. So your fader positions and your effect states. So let's say we wanted to add in some delay as we get to the big bridge here. So we're just going to bring this delay in. And we just make that change, and then we save this snapshot. So now we've got these 3 positions that we can just move between effortlessly. We can rename them. We can also rearrange them. So let's say the order of the song changes, and you actually want to move the verse, and we're just going to go right into the verse and chorus. Maybe we're not going to do the intro at all, or maybe we're going to kind of do this at the very end, and we're going to have like an outro moment with just the pad.
Yep.
So you can move these moments around.
Wow.
slot them wherever makes the most sense to you, rename them, have all of that total flexibility to be able to make those changes in advance, be prepared, but also have full flexibility while you're at rehearsal or even while you're on stage. Let me show you that. This is one of my favorite things about the app, actually. Let's say that we're on stage and we're in the moment, and we're feeling really good, but we just want to add something a little extra to this patch. So we could actually continue to just hold this pad out. Let's say we wanted to add some bass. So we could just grab it that fast. The audio's uninterrupted. And then there's that bass.
Yeah.
So all of the audio that's already happening stays real time, but we're able to bring this sound in. If you're improvising in the moment, or if you're just missing something, you realize, oh, this would really add or enhance what we're doing. Maybe it's an audible in the set list, and you really need to add an extra texture. You don't have to freak out. You can maintain what you're doing, have that flexibility. And you can easily and quickly add patches from the library in the same way. So if the pastor calls out, hey, we're gonna do this song, everybody. If you've got it in your library, it's gonna take like 5 seconds to open it up, pull that patch in, it's gonna load into your set list, it's gonna be selected and ready to play.
Explain the whole layer concept on the bottom of the UI there, like those colored lines we see going across the keyboard. Like, what's going on there?
So the keyboard represents an 88 key keyboard, just like the hardware. We can tap on this icon here to access the layer editor. So all 5 sounds across a patch are color coded. So the orange range here represents my piano, and you can see that label, SK Grand. We've got our silky velo strings, altar call pad, breathy choir pad, and sub bass. So this allows you to place instruments where you need them, and also intentionally make sure that you're not triggering your synth bass all the way up in your right hand where you really just want your piano lead lines and things. So you can just drag these layer ranges where you want them to be, or if you know the exact places you want them, you can just tap the high option and learn it, and do the same thing for the low. So if we want to maybe just put the pads in the right hand so they're not fighting with the bass, we'll leave the piano full range because that piano and bass will sound nice together, but we're just going to have the ambience coming from the right hand. So now it kind of leaves some extra space in the mix. There's not all this low rumble happening. It's just piano and bass down there. So we bring these pads in. And there's all of that separation in the mix because I've set some intentional layer ranges.
Yep, and then all that can get saved to the patch level.
Yeah, it's automatically set per patch. So if you need different layer ranges, you can duplicate a patch and move things around. The layer ranges is locked to each patch, and it's unique to each sound that's in the patch.
So let's say I have a MIDI controller keyboard that has lots of hardware, knobs and sliders and things like that. I wanted to get it to work with the Sunday Keys app. Walk us through what that would look like.
Yeah. So you can control everything in the app by touch. And I think that's a good experience because when you change through patches, what you see is what you get. The faders, the button positions automatically jump to their real world positions. But some folks really like a tactile experience, right? You want to be able to feel that fader moving and really granularly dial it in. So the Sunday Keys app has full MIDI learn functionality. You can connect any MIDI controller you'd want and then MIDI learn it to anything inside of the main UI. So you just hit the hamburger menu, choose MIDI learn. You see a representation of the UI, and now you're able to learn whatever you'd like. So let's say I just want to control these faders. I'm going to tap this one, and I'm going to move it, and that's learned. And I'm going to do the same here. We'll just do all 5. And let's say that we also want to be able to control tap tempo, because that's a pretty tactile thing. So I'm just going to select tempo, and I'm just going to tap here, like that. And so then I'm done. Now these faders are just automatically in sync here. It's super simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. I can tap and that's going to jump. And I can still control everything with the touch screen as well. So you can do it both ways. You can have it whichever way your preference is. You can go back and forth. I think there's a lot of strength in relying on the touch interface because it's so responsive to these patch changes and the specific settings from patch to patch. But you can have all the hardware control that might be most important to you or maybe that your volunteers are used to in just the same way.
So I want to go ahead and purchase the Sunday Keys app. How do I go about doing it?
Yep. So you can purchase Sunday Keys from our website at sundaysounds.com, and you're going to get access to the app format, the main stage format, and the Ableton Live formats of Sunday Keys. And then you're going to be able to grab the app on your iPad, install the library, and then be ready to go. You're going to get the library of sounds, all the functionality is going to be ready to go. It's just going to sync up to your account once you download the app. You're going to log in and you'll be set.
Oh, got it. So the login through the app is going to sync up with the Sunday Sounds account online?
That's right. You'll just use the same email. You'll log in, we'll send you an email, and that will register your device. And we're actually making the Sunday Keys experience available as a campus license, which means that you're going to be able to share this license with other people on your worship teams. So you can send somebody home with a set list and say, hey, take this iPad or go load Sunday Keys on your iPad at home. You can practice, show up to church, and already have that firsthand experience, because it's really important as a keys player not just to know the notes that I'm going to play, but to know how it's going to sound as I play them. If there's a bunch of layers in a sound or a patch, and I don't know that as I prepare, then I might be playing really aggressively. Then I get to church on Sunday and I'm like, whoa, this is really building up in the mix. I practice it with a piano at home. It doesn't sound the same. So that's why we're really excited about the Sunday Keys app being so much more portable and so much more collaborative for worship teams, because they're going to be able to have that context not just at rehearsal on Sunday, but to be able to also rehearse with that same context at home as they prepare. So one thing that we're developing right now that I think is going to be a game changer for a lot of churches is the ability to just share a set list from one device to another really easily. So a worship leader can create a set list at church using the church's iPad. They can hit share set list. It's going to generate a link that you could just text or email or put on Planning Center or whatever. Say, hey, keys player, click this link. It's going to automatically open this set list on your iPad in your Sunday Keys app, and all of the programming is already there. So you could buy really simple and expensive iPads, check them out to your team, or if your team already has iPads at home, they're going to be able to work with the exact set list that you prepared and have the context. And it's going to be as simple as just sending a text message to somebody.
Dude, I am blown away by the capability of this app and how simple this whole rig is for any worship ministry to have an amazing keyboard sound. So guys, check out the links below this video where you can go ahead and you can purchase the Sunday Keys license to be able to, again, have the app. You'll have also the main stage in Ableton projects as well, so you can check out our previous videos about those templates, because those are still great and functional if you prefer those options. But I am really excited about this. It's going to simplify the workflows for so many worship ministries out there. And then again, all of the links to the pieces of gear that we're using here, the peripherals for the setup, those will be down below in the description. Also check out our worship ministry toolkit. That's where we at Churchfront list all of our gear recommendations for your worship ministry. Thank you so much, David. Guys, check out their YouTube channel. It's amazing, the Sunday Sounds YouTube channel. They're coming out with amazing content there. Subscribe to their channel. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel or hit that like button yet on this video, please do. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.